Hey everybody, KA24DER here, being all weird in vlog style, but we're going to go out on the road today in the 240, and I'm going to give you a little update as to what the status of the 240 is. Not so terribly much has changed since the last video, but I figured it was time to take it out on the road. We're going to do some kind of on-the-road tuning today, more just data logging to see what is going on with our supercharged 240. And just a little brief catch-up in case you have missed some of what has been going on. Recently, we took this whole engine out and put a new clutch behind it, as well as a new flywheel. There's a whole new setup there out of a 280ZX. It's larger, holds more power, etc., etc. So that has been done. But also during that phase, we have relocated the oil filter and installed an oil pressure sensor that is now a digital oil pressure sensor inside of the car. Also, we made a new intake with a lovely booger welded injector point for the methanol/water injection, and it works. Other than that, not too terribly much has changed under here. This is pretty much what we had left here years ago. Please enjoy this view of the back of my head as I try to explain. Here, hold on. Oh, that's actually about perfect. There we go. That's all the eye contact you need, right? So I'm currently out data logging the car, basically. I have the laptop hooked up and Tuner Studio running so that I can be logging data. I don't need to be looking at it, which is nice because it just records a log and then you can view it later. So here's the things that I'm currently testing. So we've got the new setup here. So I have an oil pressure gauge, digital oil pressure gauge. Really, really quite pleased with that. So much less hassle than a mechanical oil gauge, or less risk, I suppose, because you don't have oil lines going into your into the inside of your dashboard and stuff like that. It's much nicer. Sure, they're ugly. Sure, they don't match. Who cares? Race car. As you can see here, I had put our methanol system controller right here. So this is where the injection spray computer is and the gauge. It's all in one. I've currently rigged it up over there so that it's hanging out over there. I had, at the very last firm event that we ran the car, I had a problem with the system not working one run. It just didn't respond, it didn't act, and I saw in the data that the intake temps were much higher than usual. Not really any idea why that happened. I thought it was probably some kind of ignition sequence, like as I was turning the key, I maybe turned the key too fast and it switched from accessory to run too fast, and it didn't trip that computer on. But as I've gotten the car running again, now with a better clutch, the car is much more drivable. It doesn't slip the clutch at all, and it feels like it can actually handle it. I've been driving it more and experiencing it more, and what I'm seeing is that Snow Performance methanol controller is freezing up. It's turning off. And where it has traditionally been mounted right here, I think might be a little bit of the issue in that the temperature is very high right there. As I put my leg here, I've been out driving for 10 minutes. Already that tunnel is probably 100 degrees, and I bet you the ambient temperature behind there gets up into like the 130 range. I didn't personally think that should be an issue. In my mind, a system like that should be able to handle those kind of temperatures no problem. However, I contacted Snow Performance and I was like, this is what's happening. I sent them some pictures and they said, hey, do you have that happen to be mounted in an AC vent? It's like, no, it's just kind of in the dashboard. And the reason they say that is because high temperatures are a problem for them, apparently. So if you have it in a heater vent, you got the heat on, and it gets really hot, they like to stop working. That is a little bit of a problem for me because, like I said, it's very hot right there. There's a very warm part of the car. There's 130 plus degree temperatures down there. The tunnel is here. The exhaust routes through there. Overall, there's just a lot of heat funneling through that area. Most of the insulation is gone from this car, and there's just nothing but sheet metal in between. So what I've done today is mounted that over in another vent of the car that is away from everything that's hot. That's where the ECU is, that's where the electronic control board is, and in general, other than sun heating, it does not get too warm over there. So if it has a problem over there, well, then we have a problem. Then that unit is either defective or they simply have not built in enough, heat protection in their unit. I've rewired that whole unit now twice and made sure it's getting, clean power, it's getting enough amperage, more than it could ever use or need, but not more than it could handle. Nice grounding. It's really fine as far as I could tell for that stuff. And the symptoms certainly seem to be heat related. So I'm gonna be driving the car more and more here. And I'm gonna drive it over here. So far today it has not frozen up on me, so it's working fine. I've not personally logged any data just yet, but I am gonna do some runs. The car is misfiring. It seems to have a misfire under boost, and it seems to be at high load. So especially in that 4,000 to 5,000 range, if you really give it throttle, it wants to misfire, is what I'm calling it. I think it might actually be spark blowout, but there's also the risk of it being pre-detonation because there's a lot of heat involved. So one of the main things I'm tracking is air inlet temperature. I want to make sure that the air inlet temp is not getting crazy high, and I want to make sure that it's not high when it's having those issues. So, that was the whole point of the as we're using it right now, water spray. And it has been effective. I've logged that at autocross, and it dropped intake temperatures by upwards of 40 degrees. So it's not that it's not doing anything. It might just not be doing enough. We might be running out of octane. I'm only running pump 93 right now. I have I've in the past run a 96 in the car with additives. And I want to say it used to run better than it's running now. I feel it's hitting these issues more than it used to. Now, in its previous iteration, in Grant's car, who developed he made this tune, he made the supercharger stuff, he had the same exact issue. So this is not something new. He had lots of breakups at high RPM. And it was always assumed, because he never did the water spray or the methanol spray, that it was high temperature related. So if we can decode and get enough evidence that the inlet temperatures are good, then we know it's somewhere else in the system. It's either a weak spark, blowing out spark, pre-detonation from too much heat on the actual spark plug, even though we're running colder plugs. Something else is awry there. So I'm going to try my best to get some data out of this today. I would love to chat with you as I'm driving. I need the most expensive microphone in the world, I believe, to try and get that audio for you. It's immensely too loud. Between the wind noise, even with the windows up, which I don't want to do, it's too loud, and the exhaust noise, there's just no way. There's no way. So, I'm gonna go do some driving, see what we can find. Put that down there. I don't need to be visual range. Unfortunately, I can't really see my gauge over there too well, so that's all kind of just a mystery to me. But I can tell at the end, after I'm done driving, if that's frozen, then it's frozen. Simple as that. Luckily, I don't really need to push it too hard. The condition appears well before we're in illegal territory of driving, so not an issue there. Gonna just give myself plenty of room out here. There's not really any remote roads left in my area, but this is about the quietest I have around here, with a 60-mile-an-hour speed limit, so we can do plenty of testing without going too crazy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, so we're done. We're done testing the car on the road. I've pretty much seen what I need to see. Unfortunately, it seems like our snow performance methanol controller has indeed stopped working in the nicest way I can possibly say it, which is frustrating to say the least. I certainly paid a very, very lot of money for that unit, and it has now only worked maybe 2 dozen times before completely quitting. I've already contacted the manufacturer. They unfortunately want me to mail that unit in for them to inspect and see what's going on with it, and we'll go from there. Hopefully, they will replace it. Um, but I did get some data, and I do see, even though I already know, I do see that it was not working. And honestly, it doesn't seem like it worked anywhere beyond the first 30 seconds or so, or maybe even the first couple minutes of driving. All right, so here we are in Megalog Viewer. This is the program that I use and is pretty much the industry standard for viewing logs within Megasquirt ECU data. And this is the entire run session, but this is one zoomed in little pull. And what I was doing was not dyno pulls. What you see in a dyno pull is from 3000 RPM to redline in, say, fourth gear. This is not that. This is more like a third gear pull, not even full throttle, just making boost through an RPM range. So what we have here is duty cycle, how hard the injectors are working, RPM, throttle, relative throttle position, boost, relative boost, air intake temperature, the load of the engine, which is basically the same as the duty cycle, and then the AFRs down here. So this is how hard the injectors are working. I was worried that they were getting over 100%, which is usually a sign that you need more injector. We're nowhere near there. So any breakup issues we're having right now, not because we don't have enough injector. I was not giving it full throttle. Now, with the supercharger setup we have, the difference between 60% throttle and 100% throttle, very, very minimal. I've tested that in the past, and anything beyond 50% tip in, you might as well be full tip in with this setup, because it's it's pulling in there no matter what you're doing, basically. There's certainly some gains beyond there, but for the cases of today, because I knew it wasn't running right, I wasn't going to go there. The boost, max 10.78, that's basically what it should be at. And the air inlet temperature. So we're taking that from the plate that the blower mounts to. So this is the cavity in which the intake plenums, the 4 intake runners, are taking in boosted air from the supercharger. Now, this is a direct fed system, so it's taking air directly out of the supercharger right into the engine. So it's a nice place to have this temperature reading. In this one pull, in which the engine did break up towards the end, we reached a maximum air intake temperature of 164.4 degrees Fahrenheit. To give you some kind of reference of how warm that is at the moment, let's just scroll up here to coolant. The coolant temperature at that moment was 136 degrees. Thankfully, and I don't really fully understand why, the engine runs really cool. I've never had a problem with this engine overheating. The air intake temperatures, though, are pretty volatile there. 160 degrees is exactly what I was trying to get away from. That is really, really hard air to use to combust fuel. And the very first tiny little pull, like barely getting into it, already 148 degrees. So obviously we got problems there. Obviously it's not working at all, which is a major problem. Hopefully we can get that worked out, but as of now, pretty much project at a halt until we can get that solved. I'm going to try and pull up an old data log so you can compare. So this is the last event that I know the system was working at. And this is actually the event that the system had its first failure at. Should have been a sign to me that something was going on. So the first run, this is a full autocross run here. We're going to get back to, let's go to TPS. And yeah, you can see it's a full autocross run, in and out of the throttle, in and out of the throttle, in and out of boost, in and out of boost. Really, the way the supercharger works, you might as well just throw the throttle map out of the window because it's exactly the boost profile. The intake temperature during that run looks like it takes a max of 125. 125 is very doable. Now, this is the first run of the day. 124 mid-run down into the hundreds, actually. Down into 106. So that's with the water spray working. Second run. Obviously, the car is going to heat cycle. It's going to sit there and it's going to heat soak between runs. So a little bit hotter, 135. But you'll notice throughout the run, as it's making boost and as it's pushing water, as it's using the spray, it actually lowers in temperature throughout the run. By the end of the run, 114. And then throughout the run, lower, lower, lower. Fantastic. That's great. And 140 degrees, 148, it's hot. That's hotter than I want it to be. But still, it's progress. And still, it's better. Bam! Here's a run with no water spray. Max intake temperature of 178 degrees Fahrenheit. That's not smart. It's not good to run an engine like that. It's not good to try and combust air that is already 177 degrees Fahrenheit. It's just not, it's not doable. Maybe it's doable, but you have to use a lot of octane and run the thing crazy rich, using fuel basically to cool the air. So it's pretty much cut and dry there. Here's the interesting thing. I ran the car one more time in Amelia Island. It's really tiny, so you barely ever get into the throttle too much. I didn't really have any engine problems that time. The problems we ended up having is the clutch slipping. Let's bring that up. So as it builds this one, I personally didn't remember having any issues at this event. However, after looking at the data now, I can see that after maybe the first run, that looks normal. But look at the second run. Towards the end of the run, spikes up 150. Third run, spikes up 160. And then it gets worse and worse and worse. Fourth run was the absolute worst, 178 degrees intake temp. I think that this control unit has failed completely and failed a long time ago. So that's gonna be a major problem. If hopefully everything goes cool and they just replace it. But if not, that's gonna be a major setback. It's gonna be a major setback. What we may end up doing is switching to a boost switch style, which is much more simplistic, but has way less failure points. Alright, so that's where we stand as of right now. If we can get that part fixed, hunky-dory, everything will be fine, and we'll be back on track. Hopefully that's the case. It's still going to be some time, though. In the 2 years that car is sat, the tires have become very flat-spotted. You can probably see in the footage that the whole car is just shimmying and shaking. So it needs tires. We want to change the wheels on it anyway. I want to go to a square tire setup. So it's very unlikely that in the course of the next few months, anything major is going to happen with that project. It's gotten to the point, and this is the nature of car projects where the project has escalated so much that there's nothing cheap left to do. Anything left I want to do with the car is going to cost a lot of money. And due to the nature of what I'm doing right now and just trying to get by, it's just not going to happen on the short term. So the good news is it's drivable. It's running. The clutch was a great choice, I think. It drives really nice, and it seems to grip just fine. And it's still sitting here waiting and ready to be used again. And hopefully by year's end, we'll be back to the autocross course. I think that's at least the third year in a row I've said that. But that is the current status of Red, the Boosted 240.